My golden sister left her two newborns, her 14-year-old son and her 7-year-old daughter at my house with a note. Do something useful for once. Raise them as your own. For years, I worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. After college, the oldest became a tech prodigy and landed a $700,000 job. Then my golden sister came back with shark lawyers to demand money, claiming that I had stolen her kids. But my daughter, and yes, I get to call her that, said 3 words that crushed their world. My name is Nora Bennett. I'm 37 years old. I work the front office at Jefferson Elementary. And for 8 years, I kept every receipt, every letter, every stamped envelope in a cardboard file box on the top shelf of my hall closet. My sister's lawyers billed $400 an hour. My box cost me $11 at an office supply store. I want to tell you how that box and 3 words from a 15-year-old girl beat them all. But to understand what my sister did, you have to understand what she was in our family. Vanessa was the sun. I was the porch light. When she totaled Dad's truck at 19, they bought her a newer one. When I asked for help with community college books, Mom said money was tight that year. Vanessa's wedding got a tent, a band, and 140 guests. My birthday usually got a phone call if she wasn't busy. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because it explains why, when she showed up at my door with coffee one Tuesday in March, I let her in with my heart wide open like a fool. Quick pause before we continue. I'm Clara, the woman behind this channel. I write these stories because I love that little moment when strangers from different places end up feeling the same thing. If this one already pulled you in, stay with me. It goes deeper from here. I'm telling you because it explains why, when she showed up at my door with coffee one Tuesday in March, I let her in with my heart wide open like a fool. That visit is the part that still stings the most. 3 months before it happened, Vanessa sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours. She hadn't done that since we were teenagers. She called me No-No, the nickname she gave me when we were girls, when we shared a bedroom and she'd braid my hair before school and swear she'd always look out for me. She asked about my job at the school. She asked about my hours, my rent, whether I was seeing anyone, whether I'd ever thought about a bigger place. She looked around my little rented house on Fairlane Street and said, "You've got it so together, No-No. You've always been the steady one." I actually teared up in front of the coffee maker. I thought my sister was finally coming back to me. She wasn't visiting me. She was inspecting the facility. It was a Tuesday in late June when the doorbell rang at 9:40 at night. I remember the time exactly because I'd just gotten home from my dinner shift at the Pancake Barn and I still had syrup on my sleeve. I opened the door and the first thing I saw was Caleb, 14 years old, standing on my porch in a hoodie, holding a diaper bag in one hand and his little sister Maya's wrist in the other. Maya was 7. She had her backpack on both shoulders and she was looking at her shoes. And on the porch boards between them, in 2 gray infant carriers, were the twins, Sam and Sophie, 5 weeks old, asleep. Out on the street, my sister's minivan was already pulling away from the curb. She didn't wave. She didn't roll down the window. I watched her taillights go down Fairlane and turn left. And that was the last time any of us saw Vanessa for 8 years. The note was folded once and taped to the handle of Sophie's carrier. Her handwriting, the big loops, the little circle over the I, the same handwriting that used to sign my birthday cards. It said, "Do something useful for once. Raise them as your own." 11 words, no explanation, no formula instructions, no pediatrician's name, no insurance cards. Under the tape, there was a second sheet of paper she must have grabbed to write on, and I didn't even look at it that night. I just carried the babies inside, one carrier in each hand, while Caleb held the door and Maya stood in my hallway hugging her backpack straps like the house might bite her. I called Vanessa's number 11 times that night. The first 3 went to voicemail. By midnight, The line was disconnected. I called my mother at 6 the next morning before my shift with a newborn on my shoulder, and I will repeat her answer word for word because I've had 8 years to memorize it. She said, your sister is going through something, Nora. She needs space. Don't turn this into a drama. I said, Mom, there are 4 children in my house. And my mother, the grandmother of those 4 children, said, well, maybe this is finally your chance to do something that matters. I stood in my kitchen holding a 5-week-old baby, and I understood that nobody was coming. So I did what I do. I'm a school registrar. I live in paperwork all day. Enrollment forms, custody orders, emergency contact cards, the file that follows a child from grade to grade. When your whole life is other people's records, you learn one thing that rich people's lawyers forget. Paper doesn't get tired, and paper doesn't change its story. That first morning, before I even found a pediatrician, I did 3 small things that would end up mattering more than anything else I ever did. I laid the note flat on my kitchen counter next to that day's newspaper and photographed it, front and back. I slid it into a plastic sandwich bag with the date written on the bag in marker. And I bought a spiral notebook at the gas station and wrote at the top of the first page, Kids, Expenses, and Events. Day 1. That first Walmart run was $347. Formula, diapers in 2 sizes, wipes, bottles, a thermometer, twin onesies because Sophie's bag had exactly 1 change of clothes for 2 babies. I wrote every line item in the notebook, and I taped the receipt to the page. Not because I was building a court case, because I was terrified, and lists were the only thing keeping my hands steady. If my sister came back in a week, I wanted to be able to show her exactly what her children had needed. That's the honest truth of it. In the beginning, the box was hope. It only became a weapon later, and she's the one who made it one. The pancake barn gave me 2 more dinner shifts. A month in, I added Saturday mornings cleaning offices for a janitorial contractor out by the highway. 3 jobs, 4 kids, 1 falling apart Corolla. Caleb learned to warm bottles before I'd even finished showing him. Maya didn't speak above a whisper for the first month, and she slept with her shoes next to her pillow. I found out later it was so she'd be ready, in case they got left somewhere again. I want to be careful here, because this story gets ugly, and I don't want you to think it was all ugly. There was a night, maybe 3 weeks in, when both twins finally slept at the same time, and Caleb and Maya and I ate cereal for dinner at 10 p.m. in total silence, and Maya looked up at me with milk on her chin and said, Aunt Nora, is this our house now? And I heard myself say, yes, baby, this is your house. I hadn't decided that until it came out of my mouth. Some decisions you don't make. You just find them already made, sitting in your chest. Then came the night that turned my hope into paperwork for good. Late August. Sophie spiked a fever, 103.6. 5 months old, burning up, that awful glassy stare babies get. I left Caleb with Sam and Maya, and I drove Sophie to County General, running 2 yellow lights with my hand on her chest at red ones. The triage nurse was kind. The intake clerk was not unkind. She was just doing her job, the same way I do mine. She looked at her screen, then at me, and asked the question that cracked my life open for the second time that summer. Are you this child's mother? I'm her aunt. Her mother left her with me. Do you have legal guardianship? A custody order? A power of attorney? Anything signed? I had a diaper bag, a screaming baby, and a sandwich bag with a note in it back at the house. That's what I had. The clerk lowered her voice, and she said, Ma'am, they'll treat her tonight. A fever's an emergency. No one's turning this baby away. But you can't consent to her care past tonight. On paper, you're a stranger. On paper, you're a stranger. I sat in that waiting room at 2 a.m, holding somebody else's daughter, who was already mine, and I made the second decision that made itself. Monday morning, I called the school and told them I'd be late. Then I drove to the county courthouse, took a number at the family division window, and asked the clerk a question that would take 8 years to finish answering. What do I file so that no one can ever ask me that question again? The woman at the family division window was named Miss D, and she'd worked that counter for 19 years. She slid a packet across to me and said, "Guardianship of a minor. You'll want 4 of these, 1 per child. Fill them out in black ink and honey. Keep copies of everything you ever hand me." I almost laughed. Telling me to keep copies is like telling a fish about water. But I said, "Yes, ma'am," and I bought a second file box that same afternoon. Here's what nobody tells you about doing things the right way. It's slow, it's humiliating, and it costs money you don't have. The filing fees alone were $208 per child. The court required me to formally notify the mother, which would be funny if it weren't so cruel, because notifying Vanessa was like mailing letters into a lake. The law gave me a list of what to try, and I tried all of it. I sent certified letters, restricted delivery, to her last apartment in the city. Returned, moved, no forwarding address. I sent one to her old college roommate's place, because mom let it slip she might be staying there. Returned. I sent one to our parents' house, addressed to Vanessa Bennett, because if anyone on this earth knew where the sun had gone, it was the people who orbited her. That one came back too, but it came back refused, not unclaimed. Someone at that house held my envelope in their hands, read my name in the corner, and handed it back to the mail carrier. I put all 3 envelopes in the box, unopened, exactly as the post office returned them, green cards still attached. 8 years later, a judge would hold those envelopes and go very quiet. When certified mail fails, the law lets you publish. So there it was, in the legal notices of the county paper, between a foreclosure and a name change, 3 weeks running. A notice to Vanessa that a petition for guardianship of her 4 minor children was pending, with a hearing date, a courtroom number, and my name. I paid $94 for that ad and clipped all 3 weeks of it. She never called, she never wrote, she never showed. The hearing itself took 11 minutes. I know because Mrs. Alvarez timed it. Mrs. Alvarez is my next-door neighbor, 71 years old that year, a retired postal worker with a bad hip and a spine of solid rebar. Since the week the kids arrived, she'd been walking over at 9 p.m. on my pancake barn nights to sit with the sleeping twins, and she kept her own record of it, a bird-watching calendar on her kitchen wall where she wrote, "Ends babies, 9 to close," in the little squares. She came to court in her church coat and told the judge what she'd seen with her own eyes for 14 months. Who fed those children? Who walked the floor with them? And who had never once, not one single evening, knocked on either of our doors looking for them? The judge signed 4 orders, 1 per child, with a raised seal you can feel under your thumb like Braille. Letters of guardianship, they're called. I made 6 copies of each and put the originals in the box. On the drive home, I cried at a red light so hard the man in the next car rolled his window down to ask if I was okay. I was more okay than I had been in over a year. Nobody at any hospital desk could ever again call me a stranger. Now, I have to give you 8 years, and I'm going to give them to you the way I lived them, as paper and small hours. Every September, 4 enrollment packets in my own handwriting at my own front office counter, Nora Bennett, legal guardian, in the signature block, my coworker Patrice notarizing where needed because we keep a notary on staff for custody files. Every February, my tax return, 4 dependents, prepared at the free clinic at the library until Caleb learned to do them better than the volunteers. Every checkup, every shot record, every parent-teacher conference. Maya's teachers knew my face. The twins' pediatrician, Dr. Osi, knew my coffee order. Sam had ear tubes at 2. I signed the surgical consent alone in a bright hallway, and nobody questioned it because my paper was in order. Sophie needed glasses at 5, and I picked up a 4th shift for a month to cover the frames she loved. Little red ones, $40 extra. It went in the notebook. By then, there were 9 notebooks. I will not pretend it was all sweet. There were nights I sat on the bathroom floor with the fan running so the kids wouldn't hear me come apart. There was the month the Corolla's transmission went, And I paid for it in 4 installments, and we ate a lot of rice. There was Maya's third-grade Mother's Day breakfast, when she stood in the cafeteria doorway, scanning the room in a panic until she found me. I'd swapped shifts to be there. And the look on her face taught me exactly what abandonment does to a child's arithmetic. They don't assume you're coming, ever. You have to prove it, attendance style, day after day after day, and the proof never fully clears. And once, exactly once in 8 years, Vanessa surfaced. Year 3, October, a postcard, no return address, postmarked Scottsdale, Arizona, a cactus and a cowboy hat on the front. On the back, in the big loops and the little circle over the eye. Tell my babies mommy loves them and thinks about them every day. Life is complicated. V? That was it. No phone number. No question. Not one question mark on the whole card. Not, are they healthy? Not, do they need anything? Not, did the twins walk? I stood at my mailbox and read it 4 times. And I'll be honest with you, my first urge was to burn it. Instead, I did the thing I do. Sandwich bag, date on the bag, into the box. I didn't know it yet, but that cactus postcard was the single most important thing my sister ever gave me, because it proved, in her own handwriting with a federal postmark, that she knew exactly where her children were and chose, in writing, to stay gone. Caleb, meanwhile, was becoming Caleb. He got into the robotics program at the high school on a teacher's recommendation and a fee waiver I filed. He rebuilt a junked laptop at 15 and taught himself to code on it at the kitchen table while I folded laundry, and the sound of those keys became the soundtrack of our house. Senior year, a state university offered him a full ride in computer engineering. The financial aid forms wanted a parent's information. We filed with mine, plus a copy of the guardianship letters. That raised seal again, doing quiet work. The day he left for the dorms, he hugged me so long the twins got jealous and wedged themselves in between our knees, and he said into my shoulder, I wrote down everything you did. You don't know, I know, but I know. 4 years later, on a Thursday in April, Caleb sat me down at the same kitchen table where his mother had once cased my life over coffee, and he turned his laptop around to face me. An offer letter. A tech company you have heard of. Total first-year compensation, $700,000. I made him read it out loud twice because I thought I was misunderstanding the commas. 22 years old. The boy who arrived on my porch holding a diaper bag was going to earn more in 1 year than I had earned in the previous 15 combined. And I want you to understand what I felt, because it matters for everything that comes after. I did not feel 1 ounce of wanting. I felt like a farmer looking at rain. We celebrated with grocery store sheet cake, because that's what the twins voted for. And Maya took a picture of Caleb and me holding the laptop like a fish we'd caught. Caleb being Caleb, the news traveled. The university put him in an alumni spotlight. The local paper ran a piece. Area grad lands big tech role, with that same photo. I framed the clipping for the hallway. I have thought a lot about which one of them saw it first, my mother or my sister. I've decided it doesn't matter. What matters is the math I can prove. The article ran on a Sunday. 19 days later, on a Tuesday, it's always a Tuesday with her, I came home from my shift to find a certified envelope waiting. The thick kind, cream-colored, heavy as a slice of bread. The return address was embossed. Harmon and Price, LLP, attorneys at law. I stood at my kitchen counter, still in my work lanyard, and slid it open with the same hands that had signed 8 years of report cards. The first line I saw was my sister's full name. The second was the phrase, wrongful custody of the minor children. And a few inches under that, a number with more zeros than any number anyone in my family had ever mailed me. $250,000. 8 years of silence, and the sun had finally turned back around. It just wasn't shining on the children. It was shining on Caleb's paycheck. I read that letter standing up the whole way through, twice. Then I put it flat on the counter, took a photograph of every page, and read it a third time sitting down with a pencil. I want to tell you what was actually in it, because the letter was a masterpiece of a very specific kind, the kind where every individual sentence is technically careful and the total is a lie. It said my sister had been in crisis 8 years ago and had entrusted the children to me temporarily. It said I had exploited her vulnerability and converted a temporary kinship arrangement into a permanent custody, obtaining guardianship through procedurally defective notice. That's lawyer for she never got the letters. It said Vanessa had made repeated attempts to reestablish contact that I had obstructed. It demanded that I consent to immediate reunification of the twins with their mother. It demanded a family accounting. And then, in a paragraph dressed up in words like interim support and compensatory arrangement, it demanded $250,000 and invited Mr. Caleb Bennett as an adult member of the family with means to participate in the resolution. They put my boy's paycheck in a demand letter, 8 years without a phone call on his birthday, and they put his salary in a legal document 19 days after it hit the newspaper. The pencil was for the margins. 22 years in school offices trains your eye for one thing above all: dates. And the letter had a date problem. It claimed repeated attempts at contact, but named not one date, not one method, not one address. I wrote in the margin, in my tidy front office handwriting, when, where, show one. Then I went to the hall closet and took down the box, and for the first time in 8 years, I went through it not as a scrapbook, but as an arsenal. 3 returned certified envelopes, 1 marked refused. 3 weeks of published notice. 4 guardianship orders with raised seals. A cactus postcard from Scottsdale that said, "Life is complicated and ask no questions." 9 spiral notebooks and a shoebox of receipts. And 1 sandwich bag, dated in marker, holding 11 words in the big looped handwriting of a woman who was now paying $400 an hour to call me a kidnapper. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't scared. I was scared the way you're scared when the other side has money and you have a Corolla. But under the fear, there was something steadier. And I'd be lying if I didn't name it. I had been getting ready for this conversation for 8 years. Not because I'm a genius, because I'd been left before, by the same person, and people who get left learn to keep their receipts. Vanessa herself came back on a Saturday. Not to a lawyer's office, to my backyard. It was the twins' 8th birthday. Streamers on the fence, a folding table of juice boxes, 11 third graders, Mrs. Alvarez frosting cupcakes on my porch. At 2:15, a white SUV I didn't recognize parked across my driveway. Across it, blocking it, the way she's parked her whole life. And my sister stepped out of it for the first time in 8 years, in cream-colored pants, carrying 2 enormous wrapped boxes, followed by a young man with a camera on a stabilizer rig. She brought a videographer to a child's birthday party. I want that to sink in the way it sank into me. Standing there with a juice box in each hand, she had hired a man to film her reunion with the babies she left on a porch because the footage was going somewhere. To a mediator, to a judge, to a family court evaluator. The same reason I keep receipts. Except her receipt was going to be manufactured this afternoon, in my yard, using my kids as props. "Sam! Sophie!" she called out, arms wide, voice pitched to Carrie. "It's Mommy! Mommy's home, babies!" The whole party went quiet the way a school hallway goes quiet before a fight. And here's the detail that broke my heart in half. The twins stepped closer to each other. Not to her, to each other, shoulders touching. And Sam, my Sam, who narrates his whole life at full volume, looked up at me and asked, loud enough for the camera to catch it, "Aunt Nora, who is that lady?" For 1 second, my sister's face came apart. The camera was rolling, and her own son had just handed the future courtroom a fact she couldn't bill her way around. Her children did not know her face. She recovered fast. She's always been a fast recoverer. Knelt down, wet-eyed, and started the speech. My babies. Mommy never stopped thinking about you. Mommy had to go away, but she's here now. I did not scream. I want a medal for it, honestly, but I did not scream because 11 third graders were watching, and because a screaming aunt is exactly the footage a videographer gets paid to catch. I walked over, stood between her and the cake table, and I used my front office voice, the one built for angry parents at the counter. Vanessa, this is a children's party. You and your camera operator are not staying. Anything you want to say to me, you can send through the lawyers whose letter is on my counter. They're my children, she said, still projecting to the cheap seats. You can't keep a mother from her own children. That's what you've always wanted, isn't it? And to take what's mine, because you never had anything of your own. A lifetime of being overlooked hands you one useful gift. Her words couldn't reach the place they were aimed at, because that place had already grown scar tissue with children's names on it. I said, the party ends at 4. You're leaving now. And Mrs. Alvarez, 79 years old that summer, frosting knife still in hand, planted herself at my shoulder like a fence post and said, you heard her. And I'd know, honey. I've watched this yard every night for 8 years. Today's the first time I've ever seen you in it. The videographer lowered his rig. Some jobs, even hired hands won't finish. Vanessa left the boxes on the lawn. The camera got that part, her gifts abandoned in the grass, which I doubt made the final cut. And the SUV unblocked my driveway, and the party limped back to life. And that night, Maya, 15 by then, sat on the kitchen counter while I did dishes and said quietly, she looks older than I remembered. I remember the note, you know. I was there when you found it. I stopped scrubbing. In 8 years, we had never once talked about the note. I know where you keep the box, she said. I look at my school pictures in it sometimes. Then she hopped down and went to bed. And I stood there with my hands in the dishwater, understanding that my daughter had been keeping her own kind of records all along. The following week, I did meet the Sharks. Their offices were downtown, 14th floor, all glass, a conference room designed to make people like me feel like a smudge. 2 attorneys, a paralegal, a court reporter I hadn't asked for, and my sister in a blazer, doing sorrowful and brave at the far end of the table. Legal aid had assigned me a family lawyer, Miss Okonkwo, kind and criminally overworked. But she'd been double booked that morning, and I'd made a decision that made her wince. I went anyway, alone, with my box in a canvas grocery bag. They slid a settlement across the glass. If I consented to reunification of the twins and a confidential family support arrangement, everyone could avoid the trauma of litigation. And this was the phrase I wrote it down. The risk of criminal referral inherent in the notice defects. That was the whole game in one sentence. Sign the babies over, get the family checkbook open, or we start saying the word kidnapping in public. The older lawyer, silver-haired, reading glasses, did the talking. Ms. Bennett, you seem like a reasonable woman who did her best in a hard situation. But you have to understand how this looks. You isolated these children from their mother for 8 years. I took out one item. Just one. You don't show your whole hand at a poker table, and a school registrar plays more poker with angry adults than any lawyer alive. I laid the refused certified envelope on the glass, green card up, and turned it to face him. This is the notice your client's family handed back to the mail carrier, I said. I have 2 more like it, 3 weeks of published notice, and a judge's signature on 4 guardianship orders. You wrote, procedurally defective. Which procedure, counselor? I'd like the list. Take your time. I brought a notebook. He looked at the envelope for 4 full seconds, and he did not touch it. Then he said they'd supplement through proper channels, and the meeting found a way to be over. I rode the elevator down alone, knees shaking, weirdly proud, and stupidly believing I'd won something. Monday morning, 7 a.m., I was packing lunches when the knock came. 2 knocks, firm, official, rehearsed. Through the front window, I could see a sedan in my driveway with a county seal on the door and a woman on my porch with a lanyard and a clipboard. Child Protective Services. Someone had filed a report about the children in my home. Her name was Miss Reyes. And I want to say this clearly, because caseworkers get painted as villains in stories like mine, and she was not one. Miss Reyes was tired, thorough, and fair. She stood on my porch at 7 a.m. and said the words, "No parent ever forgets. We've received a report concerning the welfare of the children in this home." And my stomach dropped through the floorboards. But my hands, my school office hands, were already moving. I said, "Come in. The kids are eating breakfast. Would you like to see their rooms first or their records first?" She blinked. Nobody offers records first. People scramble, people bluster, people cry. I walked her to the hall closet and took down the second box. Not the legal one, the life one. Immunization cards, 4 kids, current. Report cards going back 8 years, dental checkups, Sophie's eyeglass prescriptions, the twins' growth charts, Dr. Osei's office prints for me at every visit because I asked, Maya's honor roll certificates, a folder labeled school contacts with every teacher's name for every year. Miss Reyes went through it at my kitchen table while Sam explained his cereal strategy to her at length, and about 20 minutes in, she looked up at me with an expression I recognized. One records person meeting another across a table, and said, "Ma'am, may I ask what you do for a living?" "I run the front office at Jefferson Elementary." "That explains the filing," she said, and something in the room relaxed by 1 degree. The report, she couldn't tell me who filed it, but she could tell me what it alleged, and the allegations told me everything about the author. Overcrowding, children sleeping on floors, the twins unsupervised at night while the guardian works, Maya parentified and exploited for childcare. Every claim was my sister's demand letter translated into welfare language, and every claim had the same signature flaw as the letter. Not one date, not one specific, nothing you could pin down because the person who wrote it had never been inside my house. Miss Reyes walked all 3 bedrooms. She saw Sam and Sophie's bunk beds with the glow stars on the slats. She interviewed Maya alone in the living room, and I will never know everything my daughter said. But I know Miss Reyes came out of that conversation blinking more than she went in. She talked to the school, my school, where the secretary is me, which meant she talked to the principal, who has watched me sign 4 kids in and out of childhood for 8 years. She knocked on Mrs. Alvarez's door and got shown a bird-watching calendar with 8 years of little squares that say ends babies. 19 days later, a letter. Report unfounded, case closed. I put it in the box. You know by now which box. And I sat in my parked car outside the post office and shook for a while, because here is what a false report actually is. It's a person you shared a bedroom with as a child, aiming the machinery of the state at your kitchen table, hoping it takes your children on the way through. Their petition had asked the court to move fast because the children were at risk. The unfounded letter didn't just clear me, it took the word risk away from them and their whole timetable with it. Meanwhile, the real case ground forward, and it taught me the vocabulary of my own life. Their side filed to terminate my guardianship of the twins. Our side, Miss Okonkwo, triple booked, heroic, and me, doing what I do, answered with the box. And in what lawyers call discovery, my sister made the 2 mistakes that ended her. The first mistake, she swore, under oath, in a written interrogatory answer, that the note was a forgery, that she had never written it, that I had invented it, manufactured after the fact to justify the taking. When Miss Okonkwo read me that line over the phone, I had to sit down on the laundry room floor, not because I was worried, because of what it meant. My sister had decided that the 11 words in that sandwich bag were dangerous enough to lie about under oath. She had looked at the same piece of paper I'd looked at for 8 years and reached the same conclusion I had. Whoever owned that note owned the story. But here's what she'd forgotten, because she wrote it in 90 seconds on my porch with a minivan idling. The note was written on the back of something. I told you, I didn't look at the second sheet that first night. When I finally had, weeks in, I'd found it was a printed page, a flight itinerary. One way, City Airport to Phoenix, departing 10:15 p.m. the very night she left them. Booked in the name Vanessa Bennett. This is why I love making these stories. People think silence means weakness until the proof is already in the room. Stay with me. We're right at that point. One way, City Airport to Phoenix, departing 10:15 p.m. the very night she left them. Booked in the name Vanessa Bennett. She had grabbed the nearest piece of paper in her own front seat, flipped it over, and written, "Do something useful for once," on the back of the receipt for her own escape. For 8 years, that itinerary had been the part of the note I couldn't look at. The part that proved the leaving was planned. She'd booked the flight 11 days earlier. Now it was the part that made forgery impossible. I didn't fake her handwriting, and I certainly didn't fake her airline booking, which the airline's own records custodian could match. When our subpoena for those records went out, I wrote the confirmation code on a sticky note and put it on the fridge, where normal families put soccer schedules. The second mistake, wore a suit and bought my son lunch. Caleb flew home for the twins' school play. He never missed one, offer letter or no offer letter. And 2 days before the hearing season began, the silver-haired lawyer invited him, as family, to a steakhouse downtown. Caleb went. 22 years old, walked in alone, ordered water. They told him this whole unfortunate conflict could disappear, that his mother only wanted her family whole, that a young man with his income could resolve the support question privately. They suggested a figure with 6 digits and spare his little brother and sisters a courtroom. And my boy, my kitchen table coder, who has never once raised his voice in his life, put a 20 on the table for the water, stood up and said, "You put my salary in a letter before my mother ever learned my shoe size. Tell your client the number she's looking for is in a sandwich bag." Then he walked out, called Miss Okonkwo from the parking lot, and gave her a signed statement about the approach by dinner time. The court appointed a guardian ad litem for the twins, a neutral officer whose only client is the children's best interest, Mr. Whitfield. Gray cardigan, soft voice, the handshake of a man who has sat in 1,000 kitchens. He came to the house twice. He watched Sophie do homework at the table where every important thing in this story happens. He met the twins' teachers. He met Vanessa too, at his office, twice. I drove past on the second afternoon and saw the white SUV in the lot and made myself keep driving. His report would go straight to the judge, and no one, not me, not the Sharks, would see it until the hearing. Living under someone else's sealed opinion of you is its own kind of fever. I filed papers at work. I packed lunches. I did not sleep much. And then, 8 days before the hearing, Mr. Whitfield called me, not about the twins, about Maya. "She's 15, he said. "At her age, the court will hear her preference. That's routine. But Ms. Bennett, I want you to be prepared. Your daughter hasn't asked to state a preference. She's asked Judge Marsh for permission to address the court. On the record, there's a difference. And in 30 years, I've seen maybe a handful of teenagers insist on it. What is she going to say?" "She wouldn't tell me," he said, and I could hear something in his voice that I chose to believe was respect. "She said," and I'm quoting her, "I've been waiting 8 years to say it, so I'm only saying it once." That night, I stood in the hallway outside Maya's room with my knuckles an inch from her door for a long minute, and then I didn't knock. Whatever she was carrying, she'd earned the right to carry it her way. She came down at midnight anyway, the way she used to as a little girl, and found me at the kitchen table with the tea I wasn't drinking. She didn't ask what I was worried about. She only asked one thing. The note. "Do you still have it?" "Baby, it's in the box. It's Exhibit 12 now." Maya nodded, the slow nod she does when a plan clicks shut, and went back up the stairs. And I sat there until 1 in the morning, understanding 2 things with total clarity. I was not the only one in this house who had spent 8 years getting ready. And on Thursday, in courtroom 4B, the Sharks, with their glass table and their $400 hours, had absolutely no idea what was coming down the hall in sneakers. Courtroom 4B is not like television. It's small, it's beige, the chairs squeak, and the air conditioning hums one half step below where you can ignore it. Judge Marsh turned out to be a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the general climate of a person who has heard every lie a family can tell and has stopped being impressed by any of them. Their side of the room looked like money. The silver-haired lawyer, a second lawyer whose whole job seemed to be handing him things, the paralegal with the rolling briefcase, and my sister in a soft gray dress that some consultant somewhere had chosen because it photographed like humility. Our side was Miss Okonkwo, one accordion folder, and me, in the navy blazer I wear to school board meetings, with the box, the actual box, cardboard and all, on the table in front of me, because Miss Okonkwo had planned to transfer everything into proper exhibit binders, and I'd said no. Let the record be the record. Let them look at $11 of cardboard the whole day and wonder what else is in it. Caleb sat in the first row of the gallery in his interview suit. Mrs. Alvarez sat next to him with her purse on her knees, subpoenaed and delighted about it. And 2 rows back, on the aisle, sat Maya, excused from 4th period, hands folded, wearing the little gold hoops I'd gotten her for her 15th birthday. So still she could have been carved. Their case took the whole morning, and I'll grant the silver-haired man this. He was good. He built a mother the way you'd build one from a kit. A young woman overwhelmed by postpartum crisis, who made the desperate, loving choice to place her children with family. Placed, like the word could carry the weight of a porch at 9:40 at night. A sister who closed ranks, who changed the locks on a family, who converted mercy into possession. Vanessa cried at the right places. She'd been coached, and the coaching was seamless. She talked about my Sophie's beautiful red glasses, and it took me a moment to realize she could only know about those glasses from the birthday footage. Even her evidence of love had been filmed in my yard. When it was her turn under oath, she performed grief like a recital. The years away were a fog of shame. She had written letter after letter and gotten nothing back. She had flown home more than once and stood outside the house, too ashamed to knock. Beautiful. Not one envelope, not one boarding pass, not one date. The silver-haired man knew better than to ask for any and moved her along briskly, like a tour guide who knows which hallway has the wet paint. After lunch, it was ours. And what I learned that afternoon is that the truth doesn't need to perform, but it does need a delivery system. Ours was chronological, because that's how I'd built the box. The 3 certified envelopes went up first. On the document camera, green cards and all. The one stamped refused filled the courtroom monitor, my name in the corner, her family's address across the middle, and Judge Marsh took her glasses off to look at it, which I would learn is not a good sign for whoever's side the exhibit is aimed at. Then the published notices, 3 weeks, with dates. Then the guardianship orders. Then 8 years of enrollment forms, tax transcripts, pediatric records, a fee waiver, a FAFSA, not read aloud, just entered, stack after stack after stack, and the sound of an 8-year stack hitting an exhibit table is its own kind of testimony. Then Mrs. Alvarez, who raised her right hand like she was pledging allegiance to the flag personally. She testified to 8 years of 9 p.m. shifts in the little squares of her bird calendars. She'd brought all 8 calendars in a tote bag. And when the second lawyer, unwisely, suggested that an elderly neighbor's homemade records might be unreliable, she looked at him over her glasses and said, "Young man, I carried mail for 31 years. I've been keeping accurate records since before your mother kept one of you." Judge Marsh had to have a small cough behind her hand. Then the postcard, Scottsdale, the cactus and the cowboy hat. "Tell my babies mommy loves them. Life is complicated. V." entered alongside the sworn interrogatory where Vanessa claimed she'd had no reliable means of locating the children. A card mailed to my house, in her hand, 3 years in. The silver-haired man asked for a recess conference at the bench after that one. Whatever he asked for, he didn't get it. And then Exhibit 12. Miss Okonkwo laid the sandwich bag on the document camera, still bagged. We'd agreed on that. Let them see the marker date. Let them see 8 years of careful. And the note filled the monitor. Do something useful for once. Raise them as your own. The big loops? The circle over the I. Beside it, the sworn line where Vanessa called it a forgery. Beside that, the back of the sheet, a one-way itinerary to Phoenix, 10:15 p.m., her name, booked 11 days before the night she left. And beside that, the airline custodian's certification, matching the confirmation code, subpoenaed straight from their records department, which does not have a sister and does not take sides. The courtroom did that thing where nobody moves, but the temperature changes. The silver-haired lawyer wrote something on his pad and did not show it to his client. My sister was looking at the monitor, at her own handwriting 8 feet tall, and for the first time since the white SUV, I saw the recital fall away from her face and something real underneath it. I think it was the moment she understood that the porch light had been recording the whole time. Judge Marsh then said she'd received Mr. Whitfield's report, sealed, thorough, and, she noted dryly, unambiguous, and that before argument, one matter remained. A minor had petitioned to address the court. Their side objected. Of course, they objected. Judge Marsh heard the objection with the patience of a woman letting a kettle finish, then said, "The young lady has been a subject of these proceedings since she was 7 years old. She may be heard. Come up, Miss Bennett." Maya walked up the aisle in her sneakers. She didn't look at Vanessa. She stood at the little podium, gave her name and her age to the clerk. Clear, front office diction. She learned to talk on my counter. And Judge Marsh leaned in, kind as a librarian, and said, "Take your time. Tell the court whatever you came to say." The room went so quiet, I could hear the air conditioning drop its half step. My sister arranged her face into the mother mask one more time, glistening, hopeful, ready to receive whatever a daughter says to a mother in a movie. 15 years old, 8 years of waiting. Permission to speak, granted once. Maya said 3 words. "Read the note." That's all. She didn't raise her voice. She looked at Judge Marsh, then at the bagged paper sitting under the camera, and she said it again, softer, like a girl finally handing over something heavy. "Out loud, please. Read the note." And Judge Marsh, who I suspect understood in that instant exactly what was being asked of her, and exactly why it had to be a stranger's voice, an official voice, the state's own voice, that finally said the words, picked up Exhibit 12, adjusted her glasses, and read into the record, slowly, evenly, the way rulings are read. Do something useful for once. Raise them as your own. I've spent 8 years hearing those 11 words in my sister's voice, dripping, flung over a shoulder at a porch. In Judge Marsh's flat, judicial voice, they became something else entirely. They became findings, a mother's handwriting, a mother's instruction, a mother's signature on her own leaving. Read aloud, at last, in a room built to remember things forever. Maya closed her eyes while it was read. When it was over, she said, "Thank you." She wrote that to the person who raised us. Whatever happens now, everyone in this room heard what the job description was. My aunt did the job. And she walked back to her seat in the kind of silence that follows a verdict, 2 full days before the actual one. Vanessa broke before the silence did. She stood up. Her lawyer's hand came up too late, and it poured out of her, shrill and unrehearsed, the first honest testimony she'd given all day. "This is insane. You've all been hypnotized by her. She kept my children so she'd have something. She's nothing. She's always been nothing. And now he makes $700,000 a year, and I'm supposed to just get nothing?" The word rang off the beige walls. 700,000. Not Sam's name, not Sophie's, not Maya's. The number. In front of the judge, The clerk, the court reporter typing every syllable, her own son in the first row, and the daughter who had asked for exactly one sentence out loud. The silver-haired lawyer sat down first, slowly, the way a man sits when the bill arrives. Judge Marsh let the echo finish. Then she took off her reading glasses, folded them, and said, in the mildest voice she'd used all day, which was somehow the most frightening. Thank you, ma'am. That was clarifying. We'll hear closing argument in the morning, and counsel should be prepared to address one additional matter, because the court has been doing some arithmetic. 8 years is 96 months of unpaid child support. We'll take that up at 9 a.m. The 9 a.m. session lasted 50 minutes, and their table had gotten smaller overnight. The second lawyer wasn't there. The paralegal wasn't there. Just the silver-haired man and my sister, and a foot of empty polished wood between them that said everything about how the evening after her outburst had gone. Judge Marsh ruled from the bench 2 weeks later, and I'm going to give it to you the way I keep it, which is in plain words. The petition to terminate my guardianship, denied and dismissed with prejudice, which means finished forever, not to be filed again. The court found the guardianship notice had been proper in every particular, and said so with the envelopes on the monitor one last time. The court found, reading from Mr. Whitfield's report, that the twins were bonded, thriving, and situated in the only home they have ever known, and that the petitioner had had 96 months of opportunity and means to seek her children, and instead sought them 19 days after a newspaper article about a salary. Then the arithmetic. Back child support, calculated on 8 years, entered as a judgment, $131,400, plus interest, enforceable by wage garnishment wherever she works and whatever she inherits. I watched my sister receive that number, the first number in this entire story that had ever traveled in my direction, and I felt no joy about the money, and I won't perform any for you now. Here's what I felt joy about: the finding of abandonment in writing, with a seal. 8 years of "Don't be dramatic, Nora." And now, a court of law had read the record and printed the word my family refused to say. And because false things have prices too, Judge Marsh addressed the rest of it. The sworn claim that the note was forged against an airline's records and a handwriting analyst's report, referred to in the ruling as a knowing misrepresentation to this court, and sanctioned, their side ordered to pay a share of our fees, which meant Miss Okonkwo's legal aid office got the biggest check anyone had ever mailed it. The CPS report was unfounded on the record, and while no one could prove whose finger dialed it, the judge noted its timing. 3 days after the refused envelope hit the glass table downtown, with interest. Harmon and Price withdrew from representing my sister 11 days after the ruling. Sharks don't stay to go down with a boat. That's the whole thing about sharks. My parents, who had financed the lawsuit, I learned this later, a second mortgage, their retirement cracked open to fund the recovery of grandchildren they'd never once babysat, went silent when the bills came due. My mother left one voicemail that autumn. It said we were still family, that Vanessa had always been fragile, that it would mean the world if the kids could call their grandmother sometime, and that surely, now, with everything settled, Caleb could help them out of the hole all this ugliness had put them in. All this ugliness. Like the lawsuit had been weather. I listened to it twice, saved it. The box has a phone folder now, and did not call back. There's no anger in that, or almost none anymore. There's just a door, and the knowledge of who built it, plank by plank, over 40 years. Vanessa did not disappear this time. Garnishment doesn't let you. A slice of every paycheck she earns finds its way to the twins' account month after month, the most reliable contact she's ever maintained with her children. She sent Maya one letter, care of the school, 6 pages, and I gave it to Maya sealed because my daughter earned the right to her own mail a long time ago. Maya read it in her room, came down, and put it in the box herself. It's 4 pages about her feelings and 2 pages about how I misunderstood. she reported, dry as a clerk. Filed under V. Sam and Sophie asked their questions in their own time, and we answered them honestly, at kid height, with no editorializing, the way Mr. Whitfield taught me. Your mother left, your aunt stayed. Both of those things are about them, and neither one is about you. 6 months after the ruling, we finished what the porch started. With the abandonment finding entered and her rights terminated, the adoption went through in the spring. The twins, and Maya, who at 15 got to speak for herself, and did, in one sentence to the adoption judge, that I will not repeat here because it's hers, except to say it made the clerk reach for the tissue box. Caleb was 23, a grown man, past the age adoption law bothers with. He drove home for the hearing anyway and sat in the first row, and afterward, on the courthouse steps, he handed me a small box, and inside was a fountain pen, heavy, absurd, beautiful, engraved along the barrel, for the paperwork. Love, your oldest. I want to tell you what we did with the note, because people who hear this story always ask. It's not in the courthouse anymore. When the case closed, exhibits were released. I thought about burning it. Maya voted no. It was Maya's idea, actually, what we did instead. Maya, who keeps her own records, who looked at those 11 words for 8 years and decided they didn't get to stay a wound. We bought a photo album, a proper heavy one, and on the first page, before the pictures start, before cereal dinners and glow stars and robotics trophies and red eyeglasses and a sheet cake with a laptop held up like a fish. My daughter slid that note into the little plastic sleeve, sandwich bag and all, and underneath it she wrote the caption in silver marker, in her own hand, which has loops like her mother's but steadier. Instructions received, job accepted, page 1 of us. Raise them as your own. It was meant to be a slap. It turned out to be the only true thing my sister ever wrote, and we took her up on it in a court of law. The album lives on the coffee table, first page facing up, and I've watched each of the twins, at different times, sit and read it and turn the page and keep going into the good part. The file makes the truth boring. The truth, told often enough, in enough stamped envelopes, gets to just be the floor a family stands on. As for me, in August, I gave the janitorial contractor my notice. After 8 years, the Saturday job was done, and my Saturdays came home to me. The support money is the twins, in an account with 2 names on it, mine and Caleb's, because paperwork should always have a witness. And in September, I drove to the community college I dropped out of 19 years ago, took a number at the registrar's window. Professional courtesy made me smile at that, and enrolled in the teaching certification program I shelved the year my family decided I was the steady one, which I finally understand was their word for the one who pays. 12 years of signing for other people. Enrollment forms, consent forms, tax forms, court forms, 4 names, always as guardian, always on behalf of. The young man at the counter slid the enrollment agreement across and pointed to the line, and I took out Caleb's ridiculous fountain pen, and I signed Nora Bennett. No comma after it, no title, no guardian of, nobody's aunt, nobody's porch light. Just my name, for my own life, in my own hand. First signature in 8 years, that was mine alone. I made a copy anyway. Some habits you keep, because some habits are the reason you're still standing. And because the box on the top shelf has room in it yet, and from here on out, I decide what goes in. I'm Clara, and this is my channel. I love making these stories and sharing them with people across the world. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.